Welcome back to Connection Point Studies. We're glad you're here. This is the second week in a series called Get Back. And for some of you, it's a brand new group. We're glad you're trying this. And Alex, you're with me this whole session, and you're our new Connection Point Studies director as well as connection pastor. You're still doing tween work,
Yep.
which is awesome. You have a great time. In fact, you do small groups with them, don't you? You're developing
We're
that on
just getting that
Sundays.
going. Yeah, we're just trying to get that going, and it's exciting to see the kids' energy behind that.
Awesome. So you've got some advice because you've been in groups and you're helping to lead these new groups. So give some advice. Maybe this new group's out there and there's a leader out there, and you go, they need some advice. So
Well,
give some advice.
the advice that I say for calling it advice means that I'm a professional at this. So, but I would say share the leadership. And what I mean by that is that allow each time you guys meet, allow somebody else to kind of be the one that hits play.
Takes
That
the thing.
asks the questions, that kind of takes charge of it, opens in prayer, closes in prayer.
I've done that too, and I found that everybody's nicer to the leader when you do that because they all take their turn.
Then they all feel the pain.
Yeah, they want to answer the question when the question comes, because they know that if they don't, the leader will have to. So
Right.
Speaking of question, we always have a warm-up question. A warm-up question means everybody in the group answers that. So we want you as a group, everyone in the group answers this question. So Alex, let's give them a warm-up question. This is kind of a fun one. So
All
let's
right.
start out.
Okay. All right. Here's the question. Again, please everybody answer. But what was a privilege that you experienced as a kid?
All right, Alex. So you grew up around here, really, didn't you? Or
Yep, we did.
Okay.
Yeah, our family grew up
Okay.
just down the road here. But
Tell me the privilege you had as a kid.
well, we grew up with a little bit of property, and that meant that we got to go out and help Dad work on fencing. The privilege was not doing that. The privilege was when Grandpa would come over. Grandpa didn't work on fencing. Grandpa came and picked all of us kids up and took us to Kid Valley and got us milkshakes.
So that was the big privilege, Grandpa coming over.
Grandpa
huh?
coming over. Yep, Grandpa Dick coming over and giving us milkshakes was that was something we
a
looked forward
great
to.
time. Privilege for me. I grew up when my dad had this car rental place, and so we had lots of cars around, and so I got to start driving when I was 12, 13 years old. Really learned how to drive. It was really fun. That was a great time. Well, we're in the study, and it's actually Romans chapter 12, which is talking about our privilege of doing what God's asked us to do. And we want people to actually read. What are the verses we want them to read?
Well, we wanted to read Romans 12, verses 3 through 8 is what we wanted to read, 3 through 8.
And then as they read those verses, we're going to give them a couple of questions each time. So give them the first question, and that they'll be ready to talk about.
Okay, so after you read, we want you to ask this, is how do we measure ourselves by faith?
All right, that's kind of an interesting question because this talks about an honest evaluation. That's what he says, an honest evaluation. What do you think he meant by that? What do you think he was talking about there? Because that's the measurement thing, right?
Right. I mean, I would say really we go from having a human measurement, right, which is the way that we set our own standards.
What do we tend to do when we use our measurements?
Well, we deflect back to measuring ourselves against the success of somebody else.
Yeah.
And
Or the failure of someone else.
or the
What-
failure,
yeah,
capitalizing.
Yeah, it's so much easier if I look at somebody and say, "Oh, that guy, I'm a lot better than that guy." I can measure myself there, but that's not the way to do it, right?
Right, no.
What's the measuring stick you think that we have to measure ourselves against?
Well, I think it goes back to the standard that Christ set. It's God's standard, and utilizing that as our example and our measuring stick.
So when we measure ourselves against the life that Jesus Christ lived, it makes us realize we probably have a ways to go, right? And we're not supposed to think of ourselves too highly. I like what it says here. Don't think of yourselves higher than you are. You need to get a measuring stick that works. So hopefully people had a good chance to share around that. Now we've got a second question we want them to focus on here, which is around verses 4 and 5. So give them that question.
Okay, so Paul uses an illustration of the church and the human body. The question is what makes us similar?
All right, Alex, the human body, I mean, we function, you're moving, all this. What do you think the similarities are there? I like the illustration. It's a great one, isn't it?
Right. Well, I mean, you think about the human body, right? We've got our hands, our arms, our legs and stuff. And then you think about the church. And often when you think of a body, a lot of times people think of the church as the building, right? But yet it goes beyond that. We're talking about how there's so many different parts.
It's a living, moving organism, isn't it?
It is.
It's just all the time.
And there are so many things I wish that people could come in and see, and we're just one example of a church, but seeing of the different things that go on, and not just in the building, but in the lives of the people of our church.
Have you ever had this happen? I get someone that texts me, they drive by the church and they say, "What's going on in the church?" They text me, and I realize I have no idea. I don't know. Parking lot's full. All these people are there, and a whole arm of the church is happening, and I don't even know what's going on.
Oh, yeah. Or the question of, hey, what time does this start? Does what start?
Yeah.
I'm not part of that one.
I have no idea whatsoever. Well, I like the illustration because it's a living, breathing, moving organization, and that's what the church really is supposed to be, is active and powerful. Now, we want to group two questions together, right, in the next question, which is questions 3 and 4, and it's around verses 5 and 6. So let's start with the first, with these two questions, and we'll give them some instructions on what to do.
Okay, so the first question is how do we contribute to the body of Christ?
Okay. And then the second question.
So, secondly, Paul talks specifically about spiritual gifts. And so with those spiritual gifts, what spiritual gifts has God given you?
Those two questions kind of go together. So answer them together, read those verses, answer them together, and we'll come back and talk about them. So Alex, how would you encourage people to answer that, or how would you answer that?
Well, I mean, when we talk about the spiritual gifts, especially, I mean, I think one thing that we learn is that it's a little bit of a trial and error thing, and you go after what you're passionate about. Mm-hmm. But what's been revealed to me over the years is that often when I didn't even realize truly my gifts until I started allowing God to work through me.
You're a 5th and 6th grade pastor.
Yeah,
and you never dreamed that would be a passion. But I hear you talk about these kids. You love these kids and their families, and all of a sudden that's a passion in your life. And you never knew you had it, did you?
Well, no. I mean, if you would have talked to me 5 years ago, there would have been no way that I would have said that I'd be working with this preteen age, these teenagers. And even then, if you talk to people that I worked with in the banking world, and I tell them that I work with 5th and 6th graders, I get a little bit of a cross-eyed look, But it really is. It becomes a passion when you truly find that calling that God's put on there.
So the answer to the first questions, when I look at it, is everybody just has to do their part. That's the answer. That's an easy answer. The harder question is, what is my part? And how do you discover your spiritual gifts and what you do? And you've kind of talked a little bit about it. I think you discover it by doing, don't you? By trying, by creating this.
You do. In order to start trying and to do that, it's when you allow God to truly come in and begin to change your heart, to be open to trying, right? To be open to doing something that you wouldn't think you're doing, greeting somebody, even if you're not the most outgoing, forward person.
I talked to someone last night that started out in a safety guard, and then he's become a coach for Blake. And when he talks about his coaching and the kids and the meaning of that, this guy's passionate, and you'd think he has kids in there, but his kids are all gone. It's just him because he loves it. And I was thinking, wow, we all do our part when we start to flow out of our passion. Now, there's times we do stuff because we just should do it, because it's the right thing to do.
Absolutely.
But then what really is great is when everybody's doing their passion. It's just exactly it, which is kind of our application question. Really, we want to center our application question, which is a question that everybody in the group has to answer. So let's think about phrasing it. Give them the question, then I'm going to add to it a little bit. It's the application of really what we've been talking about.
Right. So it's the application of here and so the question is this, is what will you do with the gifts that God has given you?
Okay. And so here's how I want you to think about it. I think there's a couple ways to say that. What are you doing now that you need to keep doing? And what are you not doing that you need to start doing? And take a little bit of time and share as a group, and you'll find out that this can be a really meaningful time. Pray together, and we'll see you next week at Connection Point Studies.